engineers standing by. Let me just go up with my camera a little bit, Skro. There we go. Steve, I'm just waiting for confirmation that we are indeed live. It says we're live, and I see, let's see. And then I just have to go to Instagram and hit go live and then back here. Okay. Sorry, because we're going to 3 different outlets. That is a challenge. Welcome, everybody. ELR 360 Live. Tom Caltabiano here. We've called for this court case, Steve Skrovan versus the people.
Which has been my whole life. It's always been Steve Skrovan versus the people.
Yes. I know you're
trying to say, no, I really am funny. And the people say, nah, I don't think so.
Yes, we'll go back to that subject, Steve. So hello, everybody. Hi, hope
Karen. Hi, Paula.
So Karen is in Plymouth, England, where some of the ancestors of our country came from a long time ago. Steve,
not any of mine.
No. Oh, yours. Yeah, you're
swarthy Mediterranean and peasant Eastern European.
Yes, you're let's call it the Czechoslovakia at the time. Skro.
Czechoslovakia. Well, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, Czechoslovakia. It was a lot of things. Now.
All right. So
Bohemia.
Now everybody's joining. So this is Tom Caltabiano. I was a writer on Everose Raymond. I'm talking to Steve Skrovan, who was one of the original writers on Everose Raymond from day one. And he contributed many scripts and many funny elements within scripts that maybe his name isn't on, but he's still guilty of contributing funny stuff to those scripts. Steve visited us once before. And we have a much bigger audience already, Steve. I think there's 6 more people who will be watching than your first appearance.
All right, good.
No,
good.
But actually, the truth is, because we cut these up and we play highlight clips, and your last appearance had 0 highlights, this will all be new information for you. So
Tom, you are just the quintessential great host.
Yes,
making somebody feel comfortable and accepted.
Yes. Well, I'm just stating what facts they call them.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
So,
also,
so
this is a prosecution.
Yes, this is. Well, so here's what's interesting. I want to go back and kind of frame it a little before we dive into the lateness episode. Steve, you're already nervous already with the, it's like a 60 minutes thing now already, I can tell.
Yeah, the upper lip is going to get very sweaty here.
Yes. So for everybody, Steve Skrovan was I'm just going to, we can get more into your history, but Steve Skrovan, very funny stand-up comedian who I worked with back in like 1993 or 94, 95. I can't remember. Steve was the headliner at a club called Catch a Rising Star in Princeton, New Jersey. I was the opening act, which means I was the MC. And I would say, hey, what would you like me to say for your introduction? And one of Steve's credits was a show called Seinfeld, which I don't know what happened to that show, but it whatever, not important. Their show business successes and failures. Steve gave me his number because he's like, hey, if you're ever in Hollywood, whatever. And I never called, but Steve was very nice, very funny. And we did 9 shows. I think we did at that point at Catch a Rising Star, which is Southern New Jersey in the United States, since we're going
Central New Jersey, basically.
Yeah. But more, yeah. If you live in Manhattan, it might as well be Alabama.
Hello, Heather. Hello, Mona. Hello, Boljadar. Wow, Annabelle.
So Annabelle, yeah, we're going to put a pin on Annabelle. Okay, so now cut 2 years later, Skro, very nice. Everose Raymond starts. Steve gets hired by Phil Rosenthal based on a writing sample. Is that correct, Steve?
You are correct, sir.
Okay, so then Steve is in the writer's room, and now I am friends with Ray, and Ray is going to move out to work on his show, and he brings me along with him as kind of his guy, okay? But I walk into the writer's room. I'm going to cut out all the other stuff, which we can go into another time, and there's a friendly face. There's Steve Skrovan, who was nice to me at Catch a Rising Star in Princeton, like 5 years ago or whenever that was. And the significance there is it's not the most friendly, everybody's on not on edge, but Phil's job wasn't secure. Nobody's job is secure, and the show is not secure. So there's no like, hey, come on in to the show and everybody's trying to make it work. But for me, Steve Skrovan was a very funny, very trusted, just nice individual, which in show business is somewhat rare, I would say, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just like any business. It's got its cutthroat elements.
Yes. So then, okay. So I want to get to the AIS episode, the lateness episode. Now, Scro, I'm just going to, believe me, you'll be doing most of the talking. I'm just trying to frame for everybody. But when Steve, one time, I think it was season 1, Steve brought up a thing about disciplining children. You may not even remember this, Steve, but It was season 1. We came in on a Saturday. Phil said, hey, we need more stories. And it just didn't gel. And I think subsequently you ended up doing it much later, much like the condom episode, which you did later. But cut to the lateness episode, and then you can take it from here. Steve Skrovan pitches an idea. And when you pitch an idea and the writer's room erupts in argument and discussion, that's when Steve can sit back and go, well, there's a paycheck coming my way. So let's go back, Steve, to that moment.
Well, yeah, and I should say that the full story, I have a Substack page, and this is the latest entry in that. It's called AIS, which, if you know the episode, you know what the significance of those letters mean. But
sorry, Steve, a lot of people don't know what Substack is.
Substack is a blogging platform, a self-publishing platform that it's used by a lot of journalists and a lot of historians and a lot of different writers from all different walks of life. And the key to it is that there are no gatekeepers. And it's also a very great networking platform. And so for mine, and you subscribe to it. And once you subscribe to it, in my case, it's free. If you subscribe to it once a month, something will arrive in your inbox, which is a funny story. It won't necessarily be about Raymond, but there's a lot of Raymond references. I've done 2 stories now that are Raymond oriented. The very first one I did was about the episode that I wrote called Somebody Hates Raymond. And I tell you the real story behind how that came about. And then there's a subsequent story after the episode aired. So if you go to steveskrovan.substack.com, which I guess we can put in the chat or whatever.
Yeah, I'll post the links, Steve. We'll see how this interview goes, but I'll post the link.
Yeah. If it goes well, then steveskrovan.substack.com, you can get the it's called that's called Rick Dees Hates Me. And then the one that I just put out last week is called AIS, and that refers to the lateness episode that Tom is referring to. And what he's referring to is I brought this idea in, and everybody had an opinion about it. And basically the backstory is that my wife and I went on a couples retreat, not too far away, just in Pasadena, another town over, just for the weekend to sort of improve the relationship. And I'd be missing football and all those other things that you normally like to do on a weekend to talk about our relationship. And there were a bunch of exercise that the moderator had, there was a group of us and had people do. And one of the exercises was take a notebook and write something down that bothers you about your spouse. And to me, this was just a minefield. This was just no good could come of this, because I'm really trapped, because if I don't write anything down, I haven't taken the exercise seriously. And if I do write something down, then what am I getting myself into? Meanwhile, my wife is scribbling furiously, like it's a Trump indictment. We got 34 counts here, and I am stumped. I'm looking at the blank page, and all writers, Tom will tell you, that the blank page is that's the enemy. That's the Death Star. It's just sitting there staring at you, mocking you. And the moderator was, we're getting towards the end of the time limit here for this exercise, and I can see the moderator is about to say pencils down, and a thought occurs to me, and I write it down. It was the only thing I wrote down in the notebook. Meanwhile, Shelley's like, you know, and I felt so happy and serene about it because I didn't know what was going to happen with this as far as the couples retreat went, but I knew I have a story for Everybody Loves Raymond. And this is later in the series. We're probably in season 6 or 7 or something like that. And stories are these precious little gems that are hard to uncover and unearth. And when you come upon one, it's, you know, you're sifting for this gold, and you come upon one, it's like, you know, the Legend of the Sierra Madre. You know, it's like you kill each other for them. And so I came in knowing, you know, so I was very happy to have gone on this couples retreat. I don't remember anything that my wife wrote down that was a complaint against me. And I just knew that I had a story. So I come in Monday, and like Tom says, I bring this up about, and the thing that bothered me is this: I don't like the way you always make me late, which was a thing. I'm kind of punctual. I'm not a Prussian field marshal about it, but my wife would take she would take her time, and you know, for women it was harder for her to figure out what to wear to thing. And I'm standing downstairs, and I bring this idea, and I told her about it, and nothing I said really kind of changed her mind. You know, it changed the habit. And so I came in with this idea, and everybody's got a story about punctuality or lateness. And it doesn't cut across gender lines. It's not always the women who are late. In some cases, it was the guys who are not on time. And so everybody related to this story very well. And so Phil sends me off, you know, like Tom says, once you've got the rooms going and everybody's got, you know, you've got something. And so we knew we had something. And Phil says, go off and write an outline. And so I go to my office, and again, there's the blank page, and I can't think of a story. We've got it's a great theme. And if stories, as Tom will tell you, you know, you've got 3 elements to them. You've got character, which of course we had, and you've got theme, and then you've got plot. And usually plot comes first. The characters are there, they're established. And then you have a plot, which is usually, you know, a conflict, a rift you're having in a relationship, something that is bothering you, irritating you. And then out of that, you build a plot. And then usually a theme will bubble up. And that's when Phil always said, okay, what is this episode about? And I think that's the reason 20 years after the show has ended, we're doing Everybody Loves Raymond live, because people still watch the show. It's durable. And the reason it's durable is Phil always insisted that the shows be about something. So in this particular case, I had the about. We knew what it was about, but I didn't know what the story was, how to wrap a plot around this. How do you dramatize it? And I go to my colleague next door, Aaron Shore, and I say, I can't figure out a story for this. I was so excited, and there's nothing more frustrating than having what you think is a great idea, and then you go, oh, wait a minute, I can't execute this. I can't find the story. And he didn't have the story for me, but he told me an anecdote. You know, it was a lead, and he told me about a friend of his who his father had an AIS system. And AIS stands for ass in seat. And when the family was going somewhere, the father would set an ass in seat, an AIS time. And if your ass was not in the car seat at the appointed time, you would get left behind. And he said his friend, it always worked. Nobody was ever late. Except he said that, except later on when his friend was now an adult and like a doctor or something, his father had set an AAS time for some extended family excursion, and his son, who was now an adult, was late, and they left without him. And so Aaron shares this story, and Phil goes, "There's your act break. Ray leaves Deborah behind." And I don't know, you probably don't have any memory of this, Tom, but it was so significant to me. I literally quaked because, first of all, let me explain the act break. In this style of show, it's a 2-act show because there's a commercial in the middle, and it's what theaters do too. It's you have an intermission, you come back for a second act. The act break is what defines your story, and the act break has to have high stakes to make the audience want to come back after the commercial, or if it's the theater, after the intermission. And that is, I remember saying to Phil, that is the greatest act break. And my voice was actually quaking like that. That's the greatest act break I've ever heard, because I could not imagine leaving my wife behind when we were going somewhere. What the emotional consequences would that be? And so I said, I got it. I don't need any more than that.
Yeah.
So this was the hinge on which I said, I just need to lead up to that, and then whatever consequences flow from that. And that's how the episode came about.
And let me jump in here, Steve, because this is kind of to set up. Steve is throwing gratitude towards Aaron Shore and Phil Rosenthal, just so people understand. Phil Rosenthal had an incident where his parents returned a gift, which was a toaster, and he was just furious about it. And it was Steve Skrovan who said to Phil, "This is a story, Steve." Phil.
That was funny because it was a second season, and we were in trailers. We ended up being in some great offices at Warner Brothers. The old Chuck Jones,
Chuck Jones was the basically head of Bugs Bunny.
Yeah, he with all the Warner Brothers cartoon, and he had this great big L-shaped office in one corner of the lot that was like the premier office. And before we went there, we were in trailers at Warner Brothers, and so we had all these cramped offices, and I had a tiny little office, but it happened to be next to Phil's office. It was like there was like a half a couch, and you couldn't open the door. I had to always move the couch to close the And so, but it was right next to Phil's office, and I'm sitting there doing whatever I was doing at some time, and I hear Phil through the wall going, "This is why there's a show. This is why we have a show." And he's yelling at somebody in his office. I get up and he's on the phone, and he's yelling at his parents because he just found out that they had returned the toaster, the Everybody Loves Raymond toaster, that he had engraved for them without even opening it. And he was so mad. And we remember we went to lunch. We all went to sushi. We went to Sushi Nizawa that day, and Phil is just bitching and moaning about it. And it hadn't occurred to him like it occurred to me immediately, because this was only the second season. It occurred to me in the sixth season, you get attuned to this. It occurred. I said, "Phil, you got to do an episode about this." And he was like, he was just so pissed that he couldn't even think of it at that point. And then later, either later in the day or the next day after he settled down, he could see it and wrote one of the classic Raymond episodes off of that. But I would never forget hearing through that little thin wall in my little office, do you realize this is why we have a show? Because of you people.
Yeah. So I bring that up just because when you're telling the story of lateness, they're like, so you went to Aaron and then Phil did this. It's like everybody contributed to the story. So, yeah. But it was Skro's, and I should add, at least the last time I saw Shelley, you guys are a very happily married couple. So
yeah, most of the time.
Yes, most of the time. Yeah. And being in the writer's room with a lot of married men, I thought, oh, it's not all the time, but you're in the spirit of it. Yeah. Is it good? It is good. So I think that because I'm about to bring up something else, which we don't want to get into, we'll get into another time, which is where Ray ends up spraying Deborah in the shower. That's a Skrovan story also. So I don't want you to, I'm saying that, I don't want you to think that Skro is on a rocky, terrible marriage. He was actually, by all outside measure, they seem to like each other.
Well, but this is the other part of, this is what makes our job so fun and therapeutic, actually, because I would never leave my life in real life, but I could now imagine the what if. And it's the same thing for the other episode, is that what if you could do this? And this is what writers are able to do. And this is why people can watch, because you can live things you would never do, but we can play them out on television. and all of these dark, notions that you might have that you would never act upon. When you have a show, you can act upon them and watch them play out, and it's you have that vicarious thrill of that.
Yeah. So then going back to the lateness, the
Yeah.
moment your voice quivering type of thing tells you that, and when Skro is talking about a act break, the act break shouldn't be a mechanical thing. It's a thing where the audience leans forward and goes, "What the hell is going to happen?" He's so far up Schitt's Creek that there's no way he can get out of this. That's what you want for an act break. Not, I don't really need to see how this turns out, because you really want to see what happens to Raymond.
Yes, and it's funny because we've been away for the show for so long. When we were in it, we knew every episode by heart. We had them all written on the board, and we could refer to this episode and that episode, and we knew, it was like internalized. Now enough time has passed that every once in a while I'll come upon one, say in a hotel room or just wherever, and it could even be one that I've written, and I'll get to the act break and I'll think, boy, Ray's got himself into quite a pickle here. I wonder how he gets out. I forgot how he got out. How did we get him out of this one? Or how did this resolve? And that, the fact that it's happening to us who know the show so well, I guess speaks to why people watch it over and over again. And it's why we're so appreciative of you, the audience, for coming back to it all the time. And what I found is that I think one of the reasons it still is on television is because people grow into it. I was on, the writers, you may know, were on strike last year, and I was on the strike lines just about every day, and was happened to be walking with a young writer who is probably 30 years younger than me, but probably even more. And he said, we were exchanging information. He found I wrote on Raymond. He said, when I was a kid, my parents would watch this show, and I go, I don't get it. What's so funny about this? And he said, then I got married and had kids. He says, now I get it. And so the audience gets married, have kids, deal with, be that sandwich generation between the kids and the parents, and a whole new audience is regenerating.
Well, what's funny is the Madeline Sweeten, who is a little girl, she has now become, when the show started, she was a little girl. Now she, then she all of a sudden can be married with kids. So she can play the role of Raymond, more likely Deborah role on there. And eventually she will become Marie. Not an accusation, but just a fact. And
it's evolution. Yeah.
So I think the point you bring up, because I've talked about this with people, Friends, which is a success on a level that you can ever hope for, does have a limited audience, which is still gigantic compared to Ever's Raymond. It's still globally, it's a phenomenon, but you're not watching it as 50-year-old, but you are watching it as a 25-year-old with a different eye.
That's right. And yeah, their audience regenerates is in a similar fashion, because it's a certain stage of your life, when you're in your 20s and you're not attached in friends and it's romance and all of that. And so young kids who are just below that age aspire to that. And that's their audience. Our audience tends to skew a little older because you have to get married and have kids to really appreciate it in its full wholesomeness.
Or get married, get divorced, and live with your parents. That works as well. So now, Skro, what's amazing to me about the lateness episode is the veracity of the arguments, how people are. Let's go really deep into that. You have people who are 100% sure that Deborah made the agreement. She broke the agreement. There's no gray area. She made an agreement. She broke the agreement. Then there's the other side of the argument, which I see with equal vigor, is the argument that if Ray was responsible, he would have said, "Is everything okay? Could there be something delaying you?"
Yes, well, that's what I think made it such a compelling episode. Not to toot my own horn, but I think just the idea of it is because you can be right and still be wrong. And when I was writing my account of it on steveskrovan.substack.com,
I'll post the links, go for
AIS,
those people. Yeah.
I'm going to keep saying it, Tom.
No, you say it as much as you want, but
Yeah. Yes. That their emotional consequence, you can be, I was researching, I saw on YouTube. And so I decided to watch the YouTube comments. And again, this didn't cut along gender lines. A lot of women were pissed at Deborah. And a lot of people, they had a deal, they had a contract. It's like, if this were a legal case, Deborah is dead wrong. And I liken it to, I've had a little border dispute with my neighbor here, and it has to do with a survey that was taken that apparently 86 square feet of our flower bed, which is on the other side of their driveway, technically belongs to them. It doesn't really have any
bearing
connection to their property. It's on our side of this driveway, and so we had a legal dispute over it and an arbitration, and they won. And so they, put a no trespassing sign in this little sliver, this tiny little triangle, and they haven't done anything with it. It's just, they've let it just, so it looked, but anybody passing by thinks we don't take care of our flower bed, because in real life, aesthetically, it looks like it's ours, even though legally it's theirs, and they can make it look like shit because it's going to look like our shit. And so that's what doesn't bother them. So in this case, it's the same thing. It's like, legally, Deborah is right. But there's other nuance. There's an aesthetic, there's an emotional nuance that makes it different.
Well, I think, and just as a side note, as Ray, when Ray did his first Carson appearance, he was talking about his wife called him because there was a bug in the bathroom and he had to go kill it. And he said, as an aside, just so you know, I have a clean bathroom. My wife wrote that part, right? So he stops in the middle of his monologue to say, my wife has a clean bathroom. We have a clean bathroom. My wife made sure that was clear. Yeah. Steve Skrovan's wife is an incredible gardener. So it's a flippant little thing, but Steve Skrovan's wife not only is an incredible gardener, but also will analyze and has offered to analyze the bacteria in my soil. Okay, so this is not just...
That's not a metaphor.
No, not a metaphor.
Literally, bacteria in the soil.
Yes, and so this is not somebody who's like, well, she had some gladiolas out there and now she can't. So when I went to Steve Skrovan's house, because my audience who've been with me since the beginning know that I bake bread every day since 2007. And I ran into Steve's wife and she goes, oh, what are you up to now, Shelley? Oh, I'm making my own bread. I said, oh, I know, I've been making bread for like 15 years. She goes, well, I have a wheat grinder. And I said, you have a wheat grinder and you've only been making bread for a month or something. So she had taken some homesteading course. She invites me over because she's a very nice person. And she has a garden in the dead of winter that my garden looks like the most neglected, sad thing. Because I'm like, boy, when tomatoes come around in 6 months, my garden will look good. But now nothing can grow. And then I go to Steve Skrovan's house and I'm like, oh my gosh, this looks like a fantasy land of gardening abundance. I've never seen anything like it. So I just wanted to say that aside, that little triangle in in the hands of your wife would be very well kept. So sorry, go back to the
well, that's the point. There is the legal argument versus the emotional argument, or the aesthetic argument, or whatever the irrational argument. There's a rational side and an irrational side, and kind of what made that situation so compelling, where you're going to have people taking different sides depending on their own point of view, their own temperament, their own experience. That's what makes it an interesting, compelling show, because people can argue over that. And so I'm curious as to your audience, and maybe they can, if they remember that episode, they can weigh in on who they think was right and who they think was wrong.
Skro, what's insulting is when you say, if they remember the episode, because as I've said to Phil Rosenthal and Ray Romano, who were deeply involved in the show, please do not attempt to remember what aired, because our audience has seen it 1,000 more times than anybody that worked on the show. So you can bring in the memory. What aired every once in a while when I say some fact, I go, yeah, let me just type it. This is the only time all of the cast was in Ray and Deborah's bedroom. Send. And then, what about this time or this time or this time? It's like, let me rephrase that. This is one of the few times that everybody was, because so the audience remembers it. I don't want to take the time to read all of the comments, but they're very heated on both sides.
Well, we've got one in right now. This is from Mona.
Yes.
Is okay. On one, and I haven't read this
Yes.
yet. On one hand, Ray was wrong. He should have gone in to see what Deborah was doing or what happened. Because what if she was ill or had an accident? And on the other hand, Deborah should have run downstairs to let him know what happened when it happened and not wait and keep trying to get untangled from the curling iron. That's great, Mona. It's a little Monday morning quarterbacking, but
be respectful of the audience, Skro.
Yeah.
Put them down. Yeah. So Annabelle writes, who Annabelle, I texted you, Annabelle, who met you and shared the article about you. Yeah. And you autographed, you remember Annabelle, of course, who was on our set many times. And she met us at our, we did a show in Connecticut, inside the writer's room in Connecticut. Mona writes, let me see. Yes. Oh, wow.
Annabelle.
Annabelle, sorry. Annabelle, wow. I've heard so many comments coming. Deborah could have pulled out the iron and run downstairs as soon as it happened to show she was going to be late.
Well, she did try to pull out the iron. She couldn't, and she tried to, and she was yelling downstairs, but Ray had already gone to the car, and she came down. And one of the, I think one of the elements of the deal is that Ray was not allowed to yell up the stairs and say, "Come on, let's go." I know at least that's in my life. Whether I remember to put that in the episode, I forget. But I wasn't allowed to. I had to trust, and I wasn't allowed to go, "Hey, where are you? Come on, clock's ticking."
Coaching. That's coaching. Here from April, who I'll assume is a woman. Deborah drove us crazy! Exclamation point. Get your butt in the car. Deborah was wrong. Another woman. Deborah was wrong for not being on time, but you never, ever, ever, ever just leave your wife. Not out of her hair, just pull. Yes. So Annabelle's saying not out of her hair, just pull the plug out and run downstairs.
Yes, but it literally in the heat of the moment, in the heat of the curling iron, if you're in the moment, I can see Deborah maybe, she thought, okay, well, this can't be a big deal. I'm going to try to get it out. And she did run downstairs, but was too late.
Yes. Yes. And it didn't. Yeah. So now I'm going to add also this element, which is a great thing that people are so engaged. When Steve Skrovan is sitting there going, I'm going to have a little more money in the bank, he has to also go, but I also have to entertain the audience to make it worthwhile. So if Steve Skrovan is the peacemaker, he's also the not comedy maker. So if the script is written where, let's make Ray a little more considerate here, we've lost the element of the show that makes us 25 years later still having the debate.
Right. And it also, it doesn't matter what form of comedy you're working in, whether it's a sitcom form or stand-up or movie, whatever. What's human about people, what's funny about people is what's human about them. And one of the things that's most human about them is that they are not rational beings. And so you are reacting in a moment. We don't act rationally. And if people did act rationally, there would be no need for, there would be no comedy in life. If people did what they're supposed to do, or if they had the time to come back and consider
their actions.
Anybody who's talking about that, Deborah should have done this and Ray should have done this. You can probably think of a moment in your own life with, "Ooh, I probably should have done that," on second thought. We've all had those on second thought. So if we're writing on the second thought, it's not going to be an interesting show.
Yes. And I think going back to the lateness thing, there's some people now we come to the end. He shows up with the flowers. And Deborah just makes him wait. Right. And there's just a noise at the end. In that respect, people are like, Deborah's really being cruel. And other people are like cheering, going, "Oh, yes. Oh, get him. He deserves much worse than that."
Yeah. That was, and in all of our episodes, when it was a, Ray Deborah conflict, or actually whether it was a Ray Marie, whoever was in conflict, if we did our jobs right, you could see both sides of the story or both sides of the argument, and that's what we worked very hard to do. And what Phil was just a master of being able to divine is, okay, we've got this. It's not a one-sided thing. Let's find out why people are doing what they do, and let them argue for it. And that's what makes it resonate, because you can identify.
Absolutely. And I think there's no pure evil. That if there's no choice, then it's not interesting. If you're like, this person is just evil, but if there's depth and you're like, oh boy, I can't quite, just like this debate, I can't quite say 100% which side, and it's really annoying.
Yeah.
In a good way. By the way, Skro, I don't have I think Phil has my AIS mug, but this is on the quotes mug. I think I'm sure you have a lot on there, but there, let me see, where did it go? Somewhere is, there it is.
AIS, yes. Yeah.
Yes, there is AIS, which I'm going to add a little addendum for people watching for the first time. By the way, Tom Cultipiano here, and talking to Steve Skrovan, who was a writer on Raymond for all 9 years, wrote many of the best episodes of Raymond, and before then wrote on a show called Seinfeld. And also we wouldn't make fun, because you can't really make fun of it, but was also a football player for Yale, which is quite the accomplishment from the athletic standpoint. What I was going to say is I got so excited about drinking my coffee, Skro, that I lost my train of thought. I just wanted a couple things, because I just saw Ray recently, and we also, as the writers in the writers' room, we all get together for a meal, and I post pictures. They're like, "Oh, can you identify who everybody is?" And they're getting to know everybody. But what I did was, along with some of the pictures from the AIS episode, I posted pictures of you in the show next to Phil during the note session, etc. But I went back and I looked, and maybe the fourth picture I ever took on Everybody Loves Raymond on the set was you on set, right? You're standing there on set. And then also, I think the first ever pictures I took in the writer's room is a picture of you sitting in front of the board, and you at the time, eventually, because of your good handwriting, you were elected, and Steve referred to it before, you were elected to be the keeper of the board, which seems small, but it was very significant in that for Phil, as the showrunner, not to go crazy, it was helpful to have a very organized way of seeing every episode that was written and where we are on the season, and then establish a code so we knew this story is broken, the script is handed in, has the script been gone over by Ray, has the script been table read, all of that stuff. So Steve Skrovan was the
I devised that system of keys so that we could know where we were at any point during the season. Yeah, it was a color-coded board. Yeah, and because I had 12 years of Catholic school, I had the best block printing.
Okay, so there is Steve Skrovan standing. Now that's him. Sorry, there's a little reflection there. Standing in front of the board, and we actually have the date. I don't know if you can read the date there, but this is the last season, I believe. Is that, or is it, hold on, let me just look so I don't lead everyone astray. Yeah, so this is the last season. Oh yes, because this got Phil into trouble. So there we go. September 2004. Okay, there's like a hostage. Steve is holding up a variety, so we know that the date, and it's like something like Horny Hunks Hijinks, not related to Skro, but the title on that thing. And then there's the home, right? So we know the home where they're going to move away, and that
was in black, so that meant it was probably shot.
Yep, it was shot, and then the next one is Not So Fast.
So I'm reading it. This is the second week of production, then.
Yep.
And so, yeah, and they're all in blue because they've all been written, and then the red ones is probably they're in either an outline form or something, and then it got, then it was green, and but black was, once it was in black, we were done with it.
Yeah, and then there's a quote there, Skro. Can you read that quote by your head?
September 2nd quote. I can't. It says,
"Read a book."
Read a book.
So now I'm going to refresh your memory. Phil was interviewed. So there was a sadness when the show ended for all of us. We, because of our deep, abiding love of art and a paycheck, were going to be unemployed. So we knew that we were going to be unemployed instantly as soon as the show ended. And the audience, and Phil says this directly, he said, here's who wanted it to end. Nobody. My family didn't want it to end. The writers didn't want it to end. The cast didn't want it to end. Nobody wanted it to end. But Phil said flippantly, read a book. Like, what do we do now, Phil? Go read a book. And so we said, well, that sounds harsh for him to say that, but he was saying it in the best spirit of comedy, which is like, I don't know, as he said, when you go to a restaurant, eventually the meal has to end, and all good things come to an end. So that was our quote. And I think that was his quote. And I think that you put that up there, even if you may not remember it.
No, that's my handwriting. Definitely.
Yeah, no, I know you put it up there. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Read it. Well, and you notice it's after the last episode. It's like whatever the last episode is, then read a book. Yeah. Adenoids. Yeah. So we already knew what the last episode was going to be.
Yep. And the power of no, there were some out of order. So
yeah.
There we go. So it's funny because I wrote an animated series for Lego that my friend she was the showrunner for the first time. And it was a little overwhelming. And I said, Steve Skrovan did this very, very exquisite keeping of the status of the script. I said, it's going to help you when you're sitting there going, we can't do this. I'm completely lost. You knew at a glance exactly where you were. And just as a funny aside, because people know him as Snaps, the photographer in the Christmas picture, every once in a while, Lou Schneider, writer, you would see him with the eraser in his hand, and he's going to go after and just destroy all of Steve's work.
That was one of Lou's bits.
Yeah, that's
that he would go up and in a fit of just irrational fury, go, not even erase it, go rub himself up against it. And we all had to hold him back because we all loved the board. The board was, it's like Ted Lasso, football is life. The board was life.
Yes. So now let me just, because I do want to go to some questions and here. Okay. So here I'm going to zoom in just in a second. That's the writer's room, but I'll zoom in to you. You're sitting very in the center.
I always sat at the
far end.
Foot of the table. Yeah. With Jeremy.
Yep. Okay. So there it's hard. It's a very wide shot. You're not going to be able to see the writing, but there you can see the episodes behind Skro. That's every single episode written on the board. And I don't know if you would remember this happening, Steve, in the writer's room. And then I want to answer some questions that are coming up.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, a writer would come in and pitch. We'd have to have outside writers come in and pitch. And every once in a while, they'd pitch an episode. And this made us feel good because you don't want to be accused of taking someone's story. But they'd be like, and then this happens and this happens. And Phil would point to the board and go, yeah, we did that not in a mean way. He'd say, we did that pretty close in season 4. And they would look at the board and go, whoops, because that meant A, they hadn't watched the show at least that many seasons. And also, if we happen to be in production on that episode at that time, they'd be like, I went in and pitched and they did my story, but this is 5 years earlier, Yeah. All right. So I'm looking, let me scroll back and look at, I did want to find Skro, that early picture, which I don't know if you've ever seen it of you early on in the writer's room. If I can't find it quickly, I will move on. Okay. There's my shopping list. There's so this I want to ask you about, if you would remember. For everybody, this is a notes session. Okay. Again, bad reflection. Let me try and get rid of my rigging. That's Phil. And then behind him is Steve Skrovan.
Yeah, with the beard. Yeah.
And Steve Skrovan is making this face, which tells me he's listening to that note and he's going, I can see that. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. I think that makes sense. And then here is Skro behind Phil, laughing very hard. This is Phil giving a note during, I believe, thank you notes. He's talking to Brad Garrett. I'm standing over Brad's shoulder, taking that photo. So here, let me. Now I'm going to see if I can find the early picture. It's funny because all of these pictures for everybody, the writers. You're getting to know the writers because I talk about the writers and you see all my behind the scenes photos. But for the public, it's just unknown schmuck number 7 who's not the actor. right? So when you see this beautiful thing, there's Ray laughing, there's Patty laughing, and there is Steve there. There is Phil that's sitting on
Jeremy,
the
Lou.
Yep, Lou, Jeremy. We know their faces. You know, they're like anybody's coworkers where you go,
Yeah.
and of course the actors do as well. So, and then here, so here we can see the board a little bit better, Scro. So I show the wide shot first. There you are.
Yeah.
Seemingly happy. And then just so you can see, this is just a push in. There's the list. Okay.
Yep.
So Humvac, net worth, Frank paints the house, the canister. Yeah. So that's the board that was behind Steve, and that's what helped us keep track of all the thing. And then here's all the writers the last season. I'm going to post a picture of our writers' room dinner. There is Jeremy Stevens in the red hat. He is no longer with us, but that's the group of writers that
in the pink is Aaron Sure, who
yes
is responsible for telling me about AIS.
Yes. And so let me add a little bit more about that. Aaron was on here and we interviewed his friend whose father did that phrase. So then I was talking to him, D. Bradley Baker. And so we're talking. And then D says, you know, my father actually didn't say ass in seat. And Aaron goes, what are you talking about? Of course he said that. And, you know, I'm paraphrasing here. And he said, no, he actually said some different phrase. And then you mistakenly thought it was ass in seat. It was something close to that. So Aaron was wrong. It wasn't ass in seat. It was something, and I'll go back and post that for people. So the origin is correct. The spirit of it, you know, going to the spirit of it. And I think, Scro, going back to your legal arguments and your little piece of land, spirit of what is the spirit of the law? So the spirit of whatever the father actually said is AIS. It's just not those exact words. And I think,
well, you know what? I like that even better because then it was completely original. Yeah. On Aaron's part, not on mine. I stole it from Aaron.
Yeah.
Aaron gave it to me.
Yes. Well, you know, I'm trying to think, Scro. There was one thing that I talked about this before. I was friends with a World War II fighter pilot, and he flew a Mustang, and I had the idea to do a radio-controlled airplane, and you were writing one of your classic sex stories about Ray wanting to have sex, and I remember we met in the hallway. You go, hey, that radio-controlled airplane thing, are you going to use that? And I was like, I have no ideas. My friend was into radio-controlled airplanes. I was not. Yeah. And then you said, I think I could put that in one of my scripts, which makes you very happy that if it adds that element, you know.
Hold on just a second.
You know, for Skrovan to take a bathroom break at this point as a professional. Oh, there it is.
This is the prop. It's obviously not a radio controlled airplane and the propeller fell off, but this is in my office. This is the plane. This is All I Want for Christmas, second season.
Yes.
And this is the plane that came through the window.
Yes. So that was at the time, that's a P-51 Model D flown by Chuck Yeager. And Robert goes, he describes it and then opens up his gift and he goes, hey, golf balls.
Three golf balls. Three golf balls.
Yes. And so that was the perfect setup to come through the window later. And I think for those of you that haven't gone, if you look for bloopers of that show, it's a very, very, very funny moment. I don't even know if you remember, Scro, the blooper from that show.
No.
Okay. So again, the audience will know everything that I'm talking about. All I Want for Christmas, the very funny thing with activate the launch sequence and all that. They're in the bedroom and they're trying to have sex, or they would like to have sex. Finally,
they've finally gotten rid of everybody and they're going to be able to have sex. Yes.
Sex. Yes. And ultimately in the episode, a radio controlled plane crashes through the window, the very one that Scro is holding. And of course, they have interrupted their holiday celebration. In the bloopers, you see a guy with a gun, an air gun type of thing, with that airplane that Scro is holding on the end of his gun, and he's just oblivious, and he walks by the window. And so
I do remember that.
So Ray and Patty are doing the scene, and they don't know what happened because all of a sudden the audience starts laughing, and when they're in their scene, and a lot of people do comment about this when I post pictures, they go, I had no idea the audience was so close and that they're still doing good acting. Well, they're really lost in the scene, so everything goes away, the cameras go away, whatever. So in this thing, when people are laughing, they have no idea the guy walks by the window holding this airplane.
Yes, and I remember I was pissed, and I think Phil was too, because first of all, even for our audience, it eliminates the illusion that they're on the second floor, but it also tipped the joke. So they look like they, because the whole idea behind that episode is that Christmas gets in the way of Ray and Deborah having sex. And first it's the parents coming over, and it's the family, and and finally they get everybody out of the house. And because Ray gave Brad such a bad gift, and Brad gave him a radio controlled airplane, Ray feels so bad that he says, you know what, why don't you play with it and I'll keep the golf ball. They trade back, sort of, so to speak. And it's that decision that ultimately prevents them, at the very end from, consummating their relationship. So
yes,
and that's the other thing you look for in a story, is that every action should have a causal relationship to what happens next. It's not like this happens and then this happens. It's like this happens because that happened.
yes.
And
And
that, yeah.
and I think, sorry, there's a clip out there, and I've explained this before, not with Phil on here, but there's a clip of Doris Roberts talking about stopping the action, and she's critical. This is after the show ended, after she's won, I think, 4 Emmys, and Doris Roberts, obviously phenomenally gifted and unbelievable. But what Steve is bringing up, the audience has only one chance to see something for the first time. And so when you're a comedian, you don't want them to hear your punchline and then you go, well, let me tell it again better. It's only one time to have a surprise. So you work, if Skro and I wrote with Cindy Shupak a story called 6 Feet Under, where Ray feels that he's shrinking. Okay. So let's say we come up with that idea and then we're working on the pitching, and let's say it's 3 months of time from when we come up and then figure out the story, and then we finally write it. Then you have a week of intense, notes and tweaking notes. And now you're in front of show night. And now let's say it's December 1st and you've been working on this since September. In September, sweating every single element. And all of a sudden in your show, a guy walks by with an airplane on a gun through the window. And you're like, oh my God, that laugh is gone. Like it's never going to be, we'll never know the true laugh.
Well, and that's what is a misconception about multicam comedy, at least in our case. And I think it had to do with the fact that Phil came from theater and Ray especially came from stand-up, is that the real laughter is how you're measuring your effectiveness and whether the thing got across. And so we really valued the audience's real laughter and wanted to preserve that. And so many times, say when an actor was going up on a line, I don't want to mention any names, Peter Boyle, and he would start rushing. He would be forgetting a line. He would fumble it, but then he'd try to rush to the end just to get to the end of it. And Phil would be yelling, hold, because he didn't want Peter to give away the punchline. That was what that was all about. And it seems, and I've been on shows where the showrunner didn't care because they knew it was going to be on TV. And the thing we're talking about, a guy walking by with the plane on a gun, setting up to shoot it through the window, it did ruin it for that audience, at least to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Of course, the TV audience would have no idea, so it would still be a surprise to them. But we were so picky, and we had so many stand-up. I was a stand-up, you were a stand-up, Mike Royce, Lou Schneider. We were
Aaron
all
Shore,
all performers. Ray, we all kind of came from that. You want to get that pure first reaction, and on other shows, maybe on Seinfeld, it was similar, but. And again, it's a stand-up culture, is that we valued that, even though we knew in the end the audience you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think in Peter Boyle's, in fairness to Peter Boyle, who was brilliant, he was a movie star. And in a
yeah,
movie, it's like, I don't need to, the audience, there is no audience. Like, let
yeah,
me do this 6 times and then we'll nail it and then we'll do it. And for us, almost in front of the live audience was in some ways the only thing that, we would be like, oh, let's get that laugh now. Let's get that laugh, because there was our only way of getting the feedback, the true, real feedback, because a lot of times there's been an accusation like, you guys use too much of a laugh track. We're like, we never used a laugh track.
and Phil would take laughs out because we had to
Yes.
go faster.
Yeah. Yeah. So now, Skro, because as I predicted, we were going to run out of time, and we've only covered one of your episodes, which is lateness at depth. So you have to come back 24 more times at least, Skro.
Yeah, at least 30.
Okay.
Somebody wrote, you should have Brad and Ray on again. They're already sick of me. So I think this is this is enough.
Yeah. For those of you, now here's a question that I know already, but I'm going to answer. I'm going to bring it up because I know the answer that you will know, which is you won't know anything. There's a question about, in the background, a white bunny. So your look should be confusion, because there was a white bunny in the background on the show. Now, as you know, Skro, I took a lot of pictures on the show.
Yeah.
Until somebody said, hey, do you know anything about the white bunny on the show? Just within the last year, I said, I have no clue about any white bunny on the show. And then I looked, I said, oh yeah, I see the white bunny. So it was something, right? Do you know anything about the white bunny?
No, it sounds like a great start for a horror film, though. If only certain people can see the white bunny. And if you see the white bunny,
yes,
you're going to die.
Yes. So the white bunny is indeed in the background there. Just like, we had a lot of toys in the background periodically, but the white bunny, I asked Amy Jannon, who asked Dan DuPont, who asked some people, and yes, they set dressing. They had a white bunny back there and they just moved it around on the set. So it would be in the background. And as we used to say in the writer's room, let's say Phil would say this, if they're looking at our background, we have a really boring show. If they're like, boy, I hope there's some entertaining stuffed animals back there, because this lateness script is really boring. By the way, Skro, a little thing, just that because you're the only one in the writer's room who worked on Seinfeld and Everose Raymond, just briefly, because we're going to run out of time, though, the difference in style between writing on Seinfeld and writing on Everose Raymond.
Oh, well, it's hard to do briefly, but the main difference is Larry David, who's also a genius, was an introvert. He did not like a writer's room. It was Fred Stoller, my friend Fred Stoller, who worked on the show, put it the best. Working on Seinfeld was like a detective's precinct where everybody was in the cubicles working on their cases, and every once in a while you bring in your case to Larry, and he'd tell you, okay, follow up this lead, and then you go back to your cubicle. Raymond was very collegial because Phil loved the writer's room, and he was an extreme extrovert. And he had this ability to be able to take in information and feedback and somehow filter it and know what he wanted and throw out what he didn't want. I've never seen anybody who could do that as well as he could. And so it was just a different temperament. It was an extroverted writer's room temperament, whereas Seinfeld was more introverted in that way. The writer's room, it wasn't, I mean, it was collegial. We had lunch together and, we all liked each other and all of that, but it wasn't like, at least when I was there, was not a group process as much as most other shows I've written on, but in particular Raymond. So
yeah,
that's the sum.
And I think, sorry, a little tea from my Nemo's Pizza mug. I drink a lot of tea, Skro, and today's tea is, I don't even know how to pronounce it, but it's from somewhere out there.
Wittard?
What did you call me?
Wittard.
Yes, it is Wittard. Yeah, it is a delicious blackcurrant and blueberry tea. Yes, my viewers love it when I share snacks or whatever. So going back to what you just said about the Seinfeld indifference, when you see all of us at the dinner, and it's not all of us, but it's a lot of us there, it's a very teamwork environment. And so what Phil was able to do, and he was very democratic about it, as opposed to Phil disappeared with the script and he took out all of my best jokes. Phil would be in the writer's room and go, Steve, on the lateness episode, you have this joke in there and people don't seem to think it's funny. Do you think it's funny? And Steve could say, I really do. And then Phil could say, okay, I'll tell you what, Steve, I'm going to leave it in for the table read. And if it does not get a laugh, if it tanks, I'm looking at you because you have hurt,
I'm looking at,
yeah,
say that.
You have hurt the show. But
yeah.
I'm just endowing it because I don't know. But on the type where Larry David disappears, you go, that all changed. I had that's.
Oh yeah, yeah, and you might not recognize anything in the script. Yeah, but you can do that if you are a genius, and Larry is a genius. I know a lot of people came out of that Seinfeld stable who try to work the same way, and they're not geniuses, and you can't pull it off if you're not Larry.
Yeah, and in that genre, and I think, I saw a Steve Jobs quote recently where he was just talking about his view of business is like the Beatles, where together they kept egos in check and they complemented each other and they worked well together. And the stuff they did together was great. And the stuff that they did solo was good. But that collective thing, you always benefited, like as much as you're talking about like the AIS or whatever, all I want for Christmas, some of the best lines in your script might be from some other people. And some of the best lines in everybody's scripts are from the writers that aren't on the page cover.
Exactly. Well, you mentioned All I Want for Christmas and the launch sequence line. That's the line from that. If anybody quotes a line from that's the one they quote. That was Lou Schneider pitching that. You've activated the launch sequence. It's hysterical. And that was the memorable line.
Yeah.
And my script, but his line.
Yeah. And this is not because you came up with many funny lines in my scripts, but on All I Want for Christmas, I remember I read the draft and they came in with the thing. And my line was, we usually hang ours on the door.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So, that's another one. Yes.
Yes.
Those probably the two best lines of the script were written by somebody else.
Yeah. So I think even your lines that wound up in my script, you don't sit there and go, and it was very off-putting to sit there and go, that was my line. So
yeah, right.
If my script is the checkbook or whatever, or Young Girl even, and I think I even remember with you, you were, I think it might have been Young Girl. Oh no, it was PT&A. It was the PT&A episode, which Phil had the idea to have her come down dressed as a hooker. And I was trying to say as a single guy, I said, well, just tell her not to wear. And I remember you saying, it's almost like you want to put your arm around me. Let's go for a walk. Like your ignorance is so deep. Like it's like,
well, it's like people saying, hey, Ray should have done this and Deborah should have done that. Well, yeah, let me tell you a little something about marriage.
Yeah. Well, I think, and Tucker relays it, and then we do have to say goodbye. In the baggage episode, and we've told this before, but Tucker, I mean, he tells it in when he tells the story about the baggage episode, which just got named in the Rolling Stone, 100 best TV episodes of all time. When he came in and said, I'm having a passive aggressive fight over the suitcase, and he told the story, and I was like, Tucker, this is crazy. Just move the suitcase. Like you're having a passive aggressive fight. And every married guy was like, do not touch that suitcase. Like this is the line. Yeah. You do not go near it. And I remember thinking, how petty are you guys? But I didn't realize you were living in a prison
standoff. Yeah. Yes, it's a Mexican standoff. And I think the only thing I remember ever contributing to that script was telling Tucker that as soon as someone touches that suitcase, the episode's over. So you want to, that's what you're leading to. And I think that was the only theoretical thing I added to that.
Yeah.
But, oh no, it was another line. But anyway, there was another line that I added to it. But
tell me the line, Skro, because people love
the line is when Deborah is reading Frank the Riot Act, when he says to her, that's the way it should be because a woman should do it. And Deborah is standing over him. He's in his easy chair and she does this whole tirade and says that's the way that should be. And I think I pitched, I know I did. Frank is like, he's got his ears pinned back. He says, obviously you've thought about this a lot more than I have. So I do remember contributing that, but otherwise Tucker, by the way, it was Tucker's brilliant idea.
Yeah. Everybody knows that line, Skro.
Oh, really?
Yes, because I just posted the Rolling Stone thing, and a lot of people wrote that line
Okay.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that was what's funny is when I looked, we did the book Everose Raymond, Our Family Album, using my photos, and I was looking at my photos, and I go, when did we do this? Because the book packager picked this one photo to put in
Yeah.
the scene, and I go, I don't even remember that moment. So before before Frank says that line, it's funny because we all know them as their real name. You know what I mean? Like even
Yeah.
when Ray's like, Patty then gets the canister, and then Patty, which I'm like,
Yeah.
well, Deborah does technically,
Deborah
but
does,
yeah. So before Frank says that line, Deborah gives that whole rant, right? And then isn't that the way, the manly thing to do? And she grabs her nether regions and gestures like a guy from Brooklyn who's going right here.
Yeah.
And so that I forgot all about that, but I have that photo, which I guess I can post someday, but I'm wary about posting that photo. But I was like, oh yeah, she did that. But in the show, Phil cuts to the single, and so you don't see her. You just see her gesturing. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's a funny moment that I'm like, okay, but yeah, that's a very, very, very well-known line, Skro. You should.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Yes. Well, hold your head high and be proud that you did that line. I'm just looking for, I'm going to post now. See now, here it is, Skro. My first ever photo inside the Everose Raymond writer's room of a very young Steve Skrovan right there.
Oh my God. Look at that.
Yeah. So that is,
he's a baby.
Yeah, that is
like a baby's butt.
Yep. Well, it smelled that way.
That's not Phil?
That's Steve Skrovan.
Wow.
Yeah. I know him well. I'll ask him.
I'm wearing the same shirt, I think.
Oh yeah. Hopefully you've washed it twice. Hey,
yeah.
So Skro, I think this is halfway through the season. It's hard for here. Let me just do this for our super fans. Let me see if you can remember this, because this is real inside information. Where did that clock come from?
Where did that clock come from? I don't know.
Okay. Doris Roberts gave it to all of us as a Christmas gift for first season. That's where it was a waterproof shower clock.
Oh, we each got one?
Everybody got one. She gave, at least the writers got one, and the gifts got bigger as the show got more and more successful. So I think this must be September or something like that. And this is before, this is a paper, calendar.
Yeah.
With post-its.
Look we lived like animals. After Raymond, I worked on other shows, and by then there were screens where, they had either screens on the table or screen in the middle, in the corner of the room where you could read the script. We could all read the script like we're all used to now. And we were in this bubble for 9 years of kind of Luddites where we've got paper scripts in our hand trying to keep up, and Phil is on, he's the only one looking at the screen. And that, can I curse on this?
You can say what Lou would say.
Lou said, Lou said, yeah. Phil says,
where does that go?
Phil says, where does that go? Or he contradicts something that Lou said because Lou can't see the screen. And Lou says something, you can correct me. I'm not looking at your fucking screen, Jew boy.
Jew man, he would say.
Jew man. Yeah. I can't see your fucking screen, Jew man.
I don't even know if he would add the F-bomb in there, but he was always, what would happen is, for everybody following along, and then you're going to have to come back, Skro. You're reading a script. You have it in front of you. Phil, everybody's contributing. So let's say Skro says, obviously you've thought about this a lot more than I have. Well, we know where that line goes because he's, but sometimes, it's 4 p.m, it's a rewrite or whatever. And it's like going through the page and somebody's drifting and not paying attention a little bit. And then someone's saying something and all of a sudden Phil's going, where does that go? Show me where that goes. And then Lou would say, I'm not looking at your screen, because no one had the screen except for Phil and Steve Meyer, who was the writer's assistant, could see it. And so we're sitting there looking at a piece of paper, a script that's, 2 iterations old already because Phil's made a bunch of changes. So you've lost track of where that is. And Phil, out of frustration, where does that go? Lou, tell me where that goes, and
Yeah.
it's,
Well,
and
you
so,
showing that calendar behind me in that first season, that's
yeah,
like even the Stone Age. That's even before the invention of the whiteboard.
yeah,
You know, this is the invention of the whiteboard. That was like the invention of fire for us.
yeah. And I would say wow, for the people that are interested in writing, it did force you to concentrate. So when you were seeing
Yeah.
the script on the screen, because when Ray did the nanny, I went with him to do the nanny. They had the screen that the whole room could see, and I was like, oh wow, that's so interesting, because I think it forced you to. I think I like it better without the screen, and also Scro before iPhones. So I would assume you would. I remember trying to convince Phil, you got to get a Palm Pilot. Phil didn't wear a watch or a Palm Pilot or use a Palm Pilot. And I was like, Phil, the Palm Pilot, every address in your hand. It's unbelievable. And Phil's like, yeah, I don't really need it. And now cut to, like
Yeah.
Phil and everybody with their phone glued. So I assume in the writer's room, either phones are banned or phone, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
it's very hard to focus. And I think I heard Ken Levine talking to a writer who worked with, I want to say, I could be wrong, but it's a giant writer like Jerzy Kaczynski, like some
Yeah.
giant magnitude writer, not sitcom writer. And he was asking about him, and he said, every writer does everything they can possibly do to avoid writing. So there was, and it's like, if there's a distraction, it's very, very, very bad
Yeah.
in the room.
Yeah.
So that's why, going back to the Stone Age with you in that early photo.
Yeah.
By the way,
We
go
lived
ahead.
like animals, Tom. We lived like animals.
I will post for everybody the actual first picture I ever took of you and Phil and everybody in August of 1996. Where we did. Now, one last picture before we send off, because a lot of people, there's Patty in the makeup room with that dress. Now, did you, and I know the answer to this from the theoretical wide scoping thing, but a lot of people have comments about Patty's dress, saying it looks like a negligee because the straps are so thin. We, in general, didn't have any say in wardrobe within reason, because we couldn't be bothered, because it would be a waste of time. Because, Phil would go, Scro, what are you doing giving wardrobe notes on Patty's?
My field. Yeah.
Yeah, not your area of expertise. Now, if there was really, really a story point, which this dress she just has to look like she's going out for the night. But there's been a lot of controversy about that dress, whether it looked like people love it, first of all. And I think one of the things that, Scro, that you recognize because you are a man is Patricia Heaton has a certain appeal as a woman. And Phil is like, I just need funny. I don't need appeal as a woman. I need funny. Funny is prime. And thank goodness for Phil, who's just like, I don't need her to be attractive more than she already is. And it's almost, Patty is such a rare thing of being very attractive and very funny at the same time,
Right.
But just for that outfit, we'll talk to Mary Ellen Boucher. Because people will be like, did Steve pick out the outfit for that? No, and never with the writers.
I'm still wearing the same shirt from 30 years ago, apparently. So I'm not one to be picking out outfits.
Well, thank God you're funny and not a fashion person. Yeah, that's stated on the obvious. All right, Scro, we'll see you again.
Yeah, next time, we can talk about is my foreign excursions.
Oh, on the exporting, yeah. So that's a great teaser. But you're not getting out of talking about the sigh where they shower each other.
Okay.
And the other 30, Scro.
And go to steveskrovan.substack.com, and there are two Raymond-oriented articles there. One is the very first one called Rick Dees Hates Me, and the very last one is called AIS, which it was what the episode we're talking about, and it goes into a little more detail, especially about the second act.
Yeah. And I'm scrolling through just to make sure I didn't miss any questions. Donnell in Austin, Texas posted your Substack link.
Thank you, Donnell.
Yeah. Let me see. Oh, and Annabelle, yes, says thank you again for signing. I'm just paraphrasing, signing your picture way back when, the article that was in the Connecticut newspaper where you were they were following up on your illustrious career, and you were featured as not only a writer, but also
Yep. Bowl number 35. Yep.
Yep. All right, Skro, always a pleasure. I will see you again as soon as I can get you again to join in. And now that I know you can, we can hear you perfectly, and we can look at you. The only request from the audience and for me is maybe a different shirt.
All right. I guess I'm gonna have to go shopping.
Talk to Shelly about this.
Yeah.
All right. Tell Shelly I said hello.
I will.
To be continued, Skro. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.